LeBron James just made the move nobody saw coming, and the backlash was instant. He didn't chase a title. Critics say he chased a shortcut. A four-time champion, a stacked roster, and a single decision that split the entire basketball world in half. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why this signing became one of the most controversial moves of his entire career, and whether the criticism is fair or if it's the laziest take in sports.
Every legacy has a season where the walls start closing in. For LeBron James, that season arrived this spring, on a Los Angeles Lakers team that could no longer keep pace with the rest of the league. The Lakers were swept out of the second round of the playoffs by the Oklahoma City Thunder, a clean, humbling exit that left no room for spin. For a 41-year-old superstar who has spent over 2 decades rewriting what's possible in professional basketball, that kind of ending doesn't just sting. It asks a question: what now? Think about where LeBron stood at that moment. 23 All-Star selections, 4 championships, a resume so dense with achievement that most analysts had already stopped comparing him to his peers and started comparing him to the sport itself. And yet, at an age when most athletes have long since retired, LeBron was still chasing something. Not fame, not money. He'd already secured both, many times over. He was chasing a feeling. The feeling of hoisting a trophy one more time, on his own terms, before the door closes for good. Free agency opened, and the basketball world did what it always does with LeBron James. It speculated. Would he go home to Cleveland, completing a storybook return to where it all began? Would he team up with Stephen Curry in Golden State, pairing 2 of the era's defining stars for one final run? The rumors multiplied by the day, each one more dramatic than the last. Fans built entire narratives in their heads. Analysts filled hours of programming with predictions. Everyone had a theory. Nobody predicted Philadelphia. That's the part worth sitting with. Of all the possible destinations, the 76ers weren't even in most people's top 5. They already had Joel Embiid, a former MVP still capable of dominating a game when healthy. They had Tyrese Maxey, a rising all-star entering his prime. They had a standout rookie in VJ Edgecombe, the kind of young talent that makes a front office excited about the future. And then, in the middle of an already loaded offseason, Philadelphia pulled off a trade for Jaylen Brown, a former Finals MVP, adding yet another elite scorer to an already crowded roster. This wasn't a rebuilding team looking for a mentor. This wasn't a franchise desperate for a spark. This was a team that had, on paper, already assembled the makings of a title contender before LeBron James ever entered the conversation. So when the news broke that LeBron was signing with Philadelphia, taking a significant pay cut from the $52 million he made last season down to a veteran's minimum contract, the reaction wasn't quite curiosity. It was shock, it was disbelief, and for a lot of people watching, it was something closer to suspicion. Because here's the thing about LeBron James. Every decision he makes gets measured against the length of his career. Basketball fans don't just watch what he does, they remember what he's done before. And that memory was about to become the center of everything that happened next. What nobody could have predicted was just how fast the narrative would turn from surprise to outrage.
The moment the ink was dry, LeBron addressed the decision himself. He wanted to be clear about his motivation, and in his own words, he made the case that this wasn't about comfort, it wasn't about ego. As he put it, the decision wasn't motivated by money, nor by family. He spoke about still wanting to sacrifice, still wanting to grind, still wanting to compete for a real shot at that championship feeling. On its face, that's a compelling statement. A future Hall of Famer, at 41 years old, saying he still has something left to prove, not to the world, but to himself. It's the kind of quote that, coming from almost anyone else, would be met with universal respect. A veteran taking a pay cut to chase one more ring? That's usually a story we celebrate. But this is LeBron James, and with LeBron, context is everything. Fans didn't have to reach far into their memories to find the comparison that mattered. Go back to 2010. LeBron left Cleveland to join Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh in Miami, forming a super team that dominated the league for 4 straight years. Go back to 2014, and then again in the years that followed. Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love, Anthony Davis. Time and time again, LeBron's biggest career decisions involved joining forces with other established stars, rather than building something from the ground up. And every single time, the same word followed him: ring chasing. Now, in 2026, that word was back, louder than ever. Because this time, the roster he was joining wasn't a 2-star situation, it was a 4-star situation. Embiid, Maxey, Brown, and now James. On paper, it read less like a basketball team and more like an all-star roster assembled in a video game, the kind of lineup you'd build if you turned every difficulty setting down to easy. The internet reacted exactly how you'd expect. Within hours, clips of LeBron's old quotes about legacy and hard work started resurfacing, stitched together with the news of his new contract. Highlight reels from his Miami years got recirculated with new captions. Sports talk shows built entire segments around a single question. Is this desperation or is this genius? And that question split people right down the middle immediately. On one side, you had fans who felt betrayed, who believed LeBron, of all players, should have been the one to prove a championship could be won the hard way, without stacking a roster in his favor. On the other side, you had fans who argued the exact opposite, that at 41 years old, after everything he's already accomplished, LeBron has earned the right to play wherever he wants, with whoever he wants, on whatever terms he wants. There was no middle ground. Not in the comment sections, not on the talk shows, not in the group chats where basketball fans hash these things out in real time. What started as a single roster move had within 24 hours become something much bigger, a referendum, not just on LeBron's decision, but on his entire career. And the loudest voices hadn't even spoken yet.
If you want to understand how fast a sports story can spiral, watch what happens when a legend enters the conversation. Charles Barkley, Hall of Famer, outspoken analyst, a man who has never once in his career hesitated to say exactly what he thinks, went public with his criticism of the move. He was one of the most prominent voices to use the phrase ring chasing directly in connection with LeBron's decision. And when a name like Barkley attaches itself to a controversy, it doesn't stay contained to fan forums anymore. It becomes a headline. It becomes a debate segment. It becomes the thing everyone in basketball has to have an opinion on, whether they want one or not. And once Barkley's take entered the mainstream conversation, it gave permission to a wave of critics who had been circling the story, waiting for a foothold. Analysts who normally speak carefully about a player of LeBron's stature suddenly felt comfortable being blunt. Radio hosts leaned into the controversy because controversy drives ratings. And fans, the ones who already felt LeBron had chased championships before, finally felt validated. Someone with Hall of Fame credibility had said out loud what they'd been thinking. The criticism followed a familiar shape, one basketball fans have seen before whenever a star joins a loaded roster. The argument goes something like this: greatness is supposed to be measured by what you build, not what you join. Michael Jordan built a dynasty around himself in Chicago. Kobe Bryant fought through years of mediocre rosters before winning again on his own terms. And now here was LeBron, the argument went, doing what he's always done, finding the fastest, safest, most guaranteed path to a trophy, rather than the hardest one. It's a powerful narrative. It's also, as we'll see later, a narrative that ignores some very important details about how LeBron actually got here. But in the moment, powerful narratives don't need to be complete to spread. They just need to feel true. And feel true it did for a huge segment of the basketball world. Social media turned into a battlefield of hot takes within hours. Highlight compilations of LeBron's farewell tour energy in Los Angeles were juxtaposed against footage of Embiid, Maxey, and Brown celebrating together, as if to say, look how easy they just made this for him. Even neutral fans, people with no strong allegiance to the Lakers or the 76ers, found themselves pulled into the debate simply because the story was inescapable. What made this moment different from LeBron's previous super team controversies wasn't the criticism itself. He'd heard versions of it before, in Miami and Los Angeles. What made it different was the age, 41 years old. This wasn't a player in his prime seeking a competitive edge. This was a player near the very end of his career, and for critics, that made the decision feel even more calculated. Not a bold move by a young star still building his legacy, but a final, strategic maneuver by a veteran trying to control exactly how his story ends. The Backlash had a name now, it had a face, and it was about to get personal.
Every controversy needs its defenders, and this one arrived fast, and from some of the most respected voices in the sport. Rich Paul, LeBron's longtime agent and the CEO of Clutch Sports Group, wasn't going to let the ring-chasing narrative sit unanswered. Paul pushed back directly against the critics, standing firmly behind his client and dismissing the idea that James was somehow taking a shortcut. When someone who has represented LeBron for the better part of 2 decades speaks that forcefully in his defense, it carries weight, not just as loyalty, but as insight into how LeBron himself actually views the decision. Then came Derek Fisher, a 5-time NBA champion, a former Lakers teammate, someone who has been in locker rooms and understands exactly what it takes to build a winning culture. Fisher didn't see the logic in the ring-chasing accusations at all. His argument reframed the entire conversation. If you're the player responsible for creating championship opportunities everywhere you go, joining a talented roster isn't chasing a ring. It's continuing to do what you've always done,
elevate the teams around you. That reframe mattered because it shifted the conversation from LeBron is taking the easy path to LeBron has spent his entire career being the reason easy paths exist for the people around him. It's a subtle distinction, but a powerful one, and it started to give the pushback real traction. Kevin Durant and Draymond Green, two players who know a thing or two about super team criticism themselves, having lived through their own version of this exact debate during their Golden State years, also came to LeBron's defense. Their support carried a different kind of weight. These weren't former teammates speaking out of loyalty. These were current stars, still playing at an elite level, who understood firsthand what it feels like to be judged for choosing to play alongside other great players. If anyone could speak to the unfairness of the ring-chasing label, it was them. And then there was the comparison that cut the deepest, the one that forced even skeptics to pause. A former teammate invoked the names of Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, two players held up as the gold standard of competitive greatness, to make the case that the ring-chasing conversation around LeBron misses the bigger picture entirely. It's a bold comparison. It's also a reminder that even legends who did it the hard way made calculated roster decisions of their own throughout their careers, decisions that history has conveniently softened with time. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't so one-sided anymore. For every fan calling LeBron a ring chaser, there was a Hall of Famer, a former champion, or a current superstar offering a counter-argument rooted in basketball reality rather than internet outrage. But amid all the noise, the hot takes, the defenses, the endless debate, one voice had remained relatively quiet, the one voice that actually mattered most, LeBron's own.
Strip away the noise for a moment. Set aside Barkley's criticism, set aside Rich Paul's defense, set aside every hot take from every commentator who's never laced up a pair of basketball shoes in an NBA locker room. What did LeBron James actually say about why he made this decision? Go back to his own words, the ones he offered the moment the deal became official. He didn't frame this as a business decision. He didn't frame it as a calculated career move designed to pad his championship count. He framed it as something much simpler, and honestly, much more human. A question he was asking himself: what am I really playing for at this point? That's not a rhetorical flourish. At 41 years old, with more money than he could spend in several lifetimes, with a legacy already secured regardless of what happens next, that question carries real weight. Most people, most athletes, would have nothing left to prove and no reason to keep grinding. LeBron chose to frame his decision around the opposite instinct. The idea that he still wants to sacrifice, still wants to work, still wants to compete for the feeling of winning, not just the fact of it. And here's where the financial detail actually matters more than the critics gave it credit for. LeBron didn't sign in Philadelphia for a max contract. He didn't sign for anything close to what he was earning with the Lakers. He took a veteran's minimum deal, a massive pay cut from the $52 million he made the previous season. If this were purely a calculated business decision, that number tells a very different story than the ring-chasing narrative suggests. Ring chasers don't usually leave tens of millions of dollars on the table. Players trying to preserve their bodies for one final championship run, willing to sacrifice financially for a better shot at it, do. There's also the basketball logic that often gets lost in the emotional version of the story. Insiders have pointed out that James's physical load is expected to lessen significantly in Philadelphia, playing alongside a roster deep enough to share the burden across multiple stars rather than placing it all on one aging superstar's shoulders. At 41, energy conservation isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Every possession matters more. Every minute of rest matters more. Joining a team that can share that weight isn't a shortcut. It might be the only realistic path left for a player his age to compete for a title at all. So was this ring chasing? Or was this simply the most honest, most self-aware decision LeBron James has made in years? An acknowledgement that time is finite, that his body has limits even his talent can't override, and that if he wants one more shot at that feeling, he needs to build the smartest possible situation around himself to get there. The truth, as it often is with LeBron James, probably lives somewhere in between the extremes. Both things can be real at once. He can genuinely want one more championship for deeply personal reasons, and also be making a calculated, strategic decision about how to maximize his odds of getting it. Those two truths aren't in conflict. They're just human. And maybe that's the part critics have the hardest time accepting.
So where does this leave LeBron James, 23 years into a career that has already rewritten the record books more times than anyone thought possible? Here's the uncomfortable truth about the ring-chasing label. It's never applied evenly. Every superstar who has ever joined a talented roster late in their career has faced some version of this criticism. And yet, history rarely remembers those decisions the same way it criticizes them in the moment. The debate always feels urgent, always feels defining, right up until the banner goes up. Then, suddenly, nobody's asking how the championship was won. they're just counting it. That's not a defense of the move. It's an observation about how selective our memory of greatness really is. We celebrate players who fight through years of mediocre rosters to win alone, and we criticize players who build the smartest possible situation around themselves to win with help, even though in both cases the goal is identical: win. That's it. That's the whole job. What makes LeBron's situation genuinely unique isn't the roster he joined, it's the age at which he joined it. This isn't a 28-year-old superstar in his athletic prime looking for a shortcut through the competitive gauntlet. This is a 41-year-old legend, closer to the end of his story than the beginning, making what might be one of the final significant decisions of his playing career. And when you frame it that way, the pay cut he accepted starts to look less like a business calculation and more like a statement of priorities. He didn't need the money, he needed the chance. Will it work? Nobody can promise that. Championships aren't guaranteed by star power alone. Every super team in NBA history has learned that lesson the hard way, sometimes painfully. Chemistry has to form, egos have to align, health has to hold. Philadelphia's roster is loaded with talent, but talent alone has broken apart plenty of promising rosters before this one even tips off its first game together. But here's what's certain, regardless of how the season unfolds. This decision will follow LeBron James into every conversation about his legacy from this point forward. If Philadelphia wins, the ring-chasing critics will likely never fully let it go. They'll argue the championship came pre-assembled, that he simply added his name to something already built. If Philadelphia falls short, the same critics will point to it as proof that even a super team couldn't save a legend chasing something that may no longer be his to chase. There is no version of this story where LeBron James escapes the conversation entirely. That's the price of being who he is. 23 years of unmatched excellence, still generating headlines, still splitting rooms in half, still capable of making the entire basketball world stop and argue about a single decision. Maybe that's the real legacy here. Not the championships, not the roster moves, the fact that at 41 years old, LeBron James can still make the whole world pay attention. So here's the real question worth sitting with. Was this genuinely ring chasing, a calculated move to inflate a championship count using someone else's roster? Or was it simply a proud competitor running out of time, doing whatever it takes for one more shot at the feeling that made him fall in love with the game in the first place? That's not a question I can answer for you. That's a question for the comment section. If this breakdown gave you a deeper understanding of the story behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe because this debate is only getting started and you won't want to miss where it goes next. Drop your take below, ring chasing or the most honest decision of his career. Let's talk about it.